I never expected to witness a cashier's heartbreaking sacrifice for her child. What unfolded next? I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The air was thick with tension. I stood in line at the grocery store, my heart racing. It was a typical Tuesday, or so I thought. I glanced at the cashier, Sarah. She was in her late 30s, a single mom. Her hands trembled as she rang up items, the scanner beeping like a frantic heartbeat. Her eyes? They were shadowed, deep-set, filled with worry. Something felt off. A child, no older than 10, stood by her side. His eyes darted around, wide and innocent. He clutched a crumpled list, fingers nervously tapping against his tiny legs. A colorful backpack hung from his shoulder, bursting with papers and drawings, yet he looked so fragile under the harsh fluorescent lights. As the line inched forward, I noticed a woman in a sleek black coat, eyes narrowed like a hawk. She whispered to the manager, her voice sharp and icy. I strained to hear her words. This is ridiculous. You can't let her work like this. I felt a chill snake down my spine. What was going on? Was she really under scrutiny, or was it something deeper? A lump formed in my throat, dread pooling as I watched Sarah's forced smile fade. Her lips quivered, and sweat beaded on her forehead. The child leaned closer to her, whispering, "Mom, we can just go home." But she shook her head. Then it happened. A heavy-set man burst through the doors, shouting about the storm outside. It sent a ripple through the store. My fingers gripped the cart tighter, my heart pounding in my chest. Sarah's body stiffened. She glanced at the door, then back at her son. A flash of fear crossed her face, a silent decision made. Her hands moved swiftly, filling bags with groceries, tossing aside any consideration of how much they cost. I could see the desperation in her eyes. The clock was ticking. She had to make a choice. She looked at her son, struggling to squeeze the last of her paycheck into each bag. A deep breath shuddered from her lips. The woman in the black coat approached with a sneer, ready to pounce. "Sarah, you're leaving these for your kid at home? What kind of mother?" The words hung like a noose. As Sarah slammed the last bag shut, her voice dropped to a whisper, "I'll make it work. I have to, for him." Tears glistened in her eyes. In that moment, the weight of sacrifice loomed over her like thunderclouds. I felt my heart crack open. Just as she turned to dismiss the woman, an errant shopper bumped into the cart. Canned goods clattered to the ground, like the echoes of her collapsing world. Everything felt heightened. What was she willing to give up to protect that child? The tension in the air was electric. I held my breath, waiting for an explosion of emotion, a break in the facade. Then, an eerie silence fell. Did everyone feel it? The tension curled in the air. Would she choose her pride or a way to feed her child? This was the moment. A choice hung in the balance, and I was frozen, skin tingling as the truth loomed closer. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The moments that followed felt like a slow-motion film, each second stretching unbearably. Sarah stood there, breathless, her arms filled with bags, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. She could either confront that woman, defending her choice as a mother, or she could push past the judgment and keep moving. The weight of her decision hung heavily in the air. A tear slipped down her cheek, carving a path of pure anguish, but she quickly wiped it away, forcing a smile that cracked at the corners. "I'm doing my best," she mumbled under her breath, glancing sideways at her son as he peered in confusion at the chaos unfolding around them. "Mommy?" he whispered, his small voice trembling. It broke my heart to hear the fear in that innocent question. What was she going to do? Would her son be swept into the storm, too? Suddenly, the man who had entered shouting about the storm caught Sarah's eye. His face softened, it was as if he could feel her shared pain. "Do you need help?" His voice was deep but warm. There was kindness in the way he looked at her, a brief flicker of empathy that pierced the clamor of the grocery store. Sarah hesitated, her resolve shaking as she eyed the bags. "There's no time," she stammered, but her voice was muddied by the fear of refusal. "Let me help you," he insisted, making his way through the crowd. "We don't have control over the storms outside, but we can choose to be a helping hand here." His sincerity wrapped around her, tugging at the remnants of her confidence. The woman in the black coat scoffed, trying to regain control of the moment, but her words got lost in the subtlety of what was unfolding. It was a simple act but a profound one. I felt the moment change, an unexpected kindness bending the harshness of the world around them. The man stepped forward, his large hands taking the heavy bags from Sarah. "I got you. How much do you have left?" It was as if she were faced with a mirror reflecting her fragility. A dream to hold her head high, to weather the storm, was within reach, but at what cost? She bit her lip, her defenses warring against her vulnerability. Something shifted in her expression, perhaps she recognized that she didn't have to bear this alone. Before the tension could dissipate completely, another voice rose, this time above the hum of the crowd. It was the store manager, irritated at the scene unfolding before him as if it threatened the unsteady status quo he tried diligently to maintain. "We need to move along," he barked, but the storm was already brewing around us, a tempest of emotions colliding. The children, the adults, everyone felt like sacred vessels holding pain, hope, desperation, and fragmented dreams. I stood on the sidelines, unsure if I should intervene or allow them to settle this among themselves. Was this my moment to step in? Suddenly, the little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, and the frail courage in his voice broke like glass. "Mommy, please, I'm scared," he murmured, tears welling in his eyes. The love he wore on his sleeve was powerful enough to pierce through Sarah's veils of uncertainty, and with that simple plea, her heart cracked open a little wider. "I'll figure it out," she replied, voice shaking but steadying as she glanced nervously at the man who had offered assistance. "Thank you, but I can't take anything for free. I have to work for it." The man nodded, the kindness unwavering. "Then let me take some of these. You'll pay me back when you can." "I promise," he said, creating a bridge between their struggles. And as Sarah nodded hesitantly, a small flicker of hope ignited in the boy's eyes, but perhaps it was a fragile flame, in need of careful nurturing. Just as Sarah began to accept this unexpected help, another storm was brewing outside. A soft rumble of thunder echoed through the store. It was a sinister reminder that the world didn't hold still for kindness, it seemed to challenge it at every turn. I felt a burning need to push through the crowd, to speak out, but the weight of my own emotions tethered me to my spot. What if I could help too? But before I could make a decision, the door was flung open again. The wind whipped inside, racing through us like a beast unleashed. In that moment of chaos, another figure emerged from the storm, a desperate look etched across their face, eyes wide in fear. A flash of recognition ignited within me, veins turning cold as I realized who it was. My breath hitched. It was Sarah's estranged brother, the one she hadn't spoken to since their father had died. The one who had walked away from their family when they most needed him. "Sarah!" he cried, and just like that, the threads of the storm twisted tighter. The shock of his voice sent a ripple through the crowd, a palpable tension brewing almost instantly. Sarah froze in place, the named storms on the outside locking horns with the tempest inside her. Her brother, the thought alone felt foreign, jagged, a memory of hurt wrapped in familial bonds she had tried so hard to forget. "James?" she managed, the tremor in her voice almost imperceptible, but I could see the realization pulling at her eyes. "Please, just listen to me," he implored, his hands raised as if surrendering to the angry winds swirling both outside and within that grocery store. "I know it's been a long time, but things aren't what they seem," the wind howled, echoing the turmoil that enveloped Sarah. One moment, she had been grappling with judgment, the rush of survival, and now here stood the ghost of her past. It was surreal, like the universe had conspired to throw every unresolved issue into the same chaotic space. "Why are you here now?" she breathed, her gaze darting to her son, who was watching the scene unfold, grasping onto her hand like a lifeline tethered to familiar waters. "I saw the news." The storm, his words stumbled over each other, desperation twisting each syllable. "I wanted to make sure. You know how storms can be. I couldn't stand the thought of you two being caught up in it." Within the frailty of his plea, something shimmered. I could see the fear in Sarah's eyes melting into confusion. It seemed too late for reconciliation, a dream to tread lightly on the surface of old wounds while still safeguarding the sanctuary she had built. A thick silence flooded the area as shoppers around them tried to catch snippets of their conversation. The atmosphere could almost be cut with a knife. "Did you come here to help, or to use this moment for your own redemption?" Sarah retorted, voice steadier now, though I could sense the jagged edges of her hurt vulnerable once again. It felt like she was putting forth more courage than she had realized she possessed. James stepped closer, ignoring the murmurs swirling around them. "I'm not here for me. I just want to make sure that you and Danny are safe. That's all that matters right now." In that moment, a small glimmer of light surfaced within the chaos. Sarah's eyes flashed with a multitude of emotions, resentment, betrayal, and something softening fearlessness perhaps. The warmth of her son's hand offered her the solace she didn't know she needed. All around them, the storm outside continued its relentless march, the threat palpable. A few raindrops began to dot the storefront windows, hammering against the glass like the sound of tiny hearts drumming with fear. Suddenly, the store manager's voice pierced through the noise again, sharper this time. "I need everyone to start checking out. The storm's only going to get worse." His tone was a hard demand, as if simply wanting to push their emotional turmoil aside and restore order. As the figures of the storm loomed larger, I felt an urge to speak, but words failed me. And in that moment, Sarah looked down at her son, whose innocent gaze flickered between the three adults, capturing the weight of uncertainty and a sense feeling the pull of both his mother and the stranger. "Mommy, can we go home?" he whispered, and just as the question hung in the air, the lights above flickered ominously, sending a chill slithering through the crowd. She turned to Danny, attempting to steel herself. "Soon, sweetheart." Her voice shook, but there was a palpable resolve beginning to form. "Just a little bit longer, I promise." The moment clung to the air heavily, charged with unresolved pain and newfound tension. Just as I was about to step closer, to offer my own hand to relate to Sarah, to stand in solidarity, another explosive clap of thunder rattled the store, plunging us into a moment of startling darkness. People gasped, and in that darkness, something extraordinary shifted. James, out of instinct or desperation, reached out to Sarah, his fingers brushing against hers. "Please," he urged, "we can figure this out together." The flickering light struggled to return, and as my heart raced, I saw the flicker that broke through, a light of possibility, a flicker of tentative connection gleaming within the shadows of an uncertain fate. But just as something was beginning to ignite between them, a shriek erupted from the exit. A woman burst through the doorway, panic lacing her features, her hands clutching a bundle wrapped in a blanket. "He's not breathing!" she cried, eyes wild, causing us to spin back to the chaos, eclipsing everything in its wake. Time froze. Was it real? Would we all become witnesses to a new heartache that overshadowed the ones already aching within us? Outside, the storm roared, and I felt the world shifting again as hope fumbled in the dark. The store erupted into chaos, the collective inhalation of the crowd mingling with the sound of the storm battering the building. The moment felt like a treacherous precipice, balancing between the foreboding outside and the desperate uncertainty inside. "Someone call an ambulance!" a voice shouted, but there was a visceral knot tightening around all our hearts, a nagging fear that help was miles away, potentially stranded in the tempest. The woman's panicked eyes searched the crowd, wild and frantic, desperation feeding the fire of her fear. Sarah's grip on Danny tightened, fear radiating from her as she turned back to James, the flicker of connection between them evaporating in an instant. "What do we do?" she breathed, almost to herself. James didn't hesitate, his instinct kicking in. "Get some help, find a first aid kit." He barked at a bystander, his voice raw but commanding. In that second, I watched him transform before my eyes, no longer just the specter of their painful past, but a figure rising to the occasion. Mommy!" Danny cried, clutching her leg, eyes wide as he sensed the surge of panic enveloping the situation. She knelt down to him, brushing a hand through his hair, trying to shield him from the burgeoning fear around them. "Danny, stay close to me. You're safe, I promise." But there was something deeper in her tone. She wasn't just reassuring him, she was breaking through her own paralysis, an acknowledgement of their dependence amidst this storm. The woman with the bundle stepped closer, her voice shaking. "He's my son, please." Tears streamed down her face as she unwrapped the blanket, revealing a tiny, delicate form, the pallor of the baby's skin stark against the dark fabric. It struck a chord of horror. The sight was both tangible and devastatingly heavy. The crowd shifted, nerves fraying as helplessness crept in. The lights flickered again, illuminating the baby for a heartbeat, his fragile body lying still and lifeless, a tragic testament to the cruelty lurking in nature. There was a distant wail of sirens in the air, yet they felt endlessly far away, like a lifeline barely within reach. James turned back to Sarah, urgency etched on his face. "Do you know CPR?" "I can try, Booty." Her voice wavered, hesitation gripping her throat. Memories flashed. She had witnessed the failure of others before, that fear clawing at her from within. But another part of her surged, instinct hardened by her love for Danny. "Yes. We can try. Someone else call 911. He jolted into action, quickly taking control of the situation, but his eyes couldn't help darting back to Sarah, drawn to her. "You can do this." With a determined breath, Sarah turned to the panicked mother, the weight of a million unspoken sorrows cascading between them. "I need you to focus on me," she said slowly, though her heart hammered loudly in her chest. "You're going to count. It's going to be okay. We're going to help him." The mother nodded, desperation mingling with a glimmer of hope, though tears continued to stream down her face. "Okay. As Sarah knelt beside the baby, I couldn't help but feel a connection forming, one anchored in collective humanity, a fragile understanding that despite the storms ravaging outside, kindness could emerge in the darkest of moments. In her urgency, the lines of painful history began to blur, the past yielding to the present, the bond between mother and child overwhelming all else. James reached for the child, his hands trembling as he glanced toward Sarah, who mirrored his fear but pressed forward regardless. 1, 2, 3, the mother counted, her voice increasingly steadier as hope surged. The soft cadence became a haunting anthem against the storm's cacophony, a synchrony of breaths and prayers whispered amidst the din. Yet, deep in my gut, I felt the weight of reality, the uncertainty still clinging. And then there was that sudden crackle of tethering anxiety, a faint sound that swelled from the crowd. Conversations hushed, eyes turning, and with that, the revelation hid. A familiar face emerged, one I hadn't seen in years, yet carried a heavy significance. "Sarah." A voice called from the entrance. It was Katie, Sarah's childhood friend. But as swift as that flicker of recognition burned, the sense of dread clawed its way back into my heart. Katie's eyes were wide, and they conveyed a single, heartrending message. This was not a reunion, but a warning. "Don't, just don't," she gasped, barely managing to step into the fray, her clothing soaked and her expression fractured. "It's getting worse. People are trapped outside," and Teresa blaring horn roared outside. The moment broke as echoes of impending disaster surged. My heart dropped, anchoring heavy in despair. Just as I thought we'd begun navigating through the storm's eye, another wave crashed in, casting shadows over every flickering hope. "That I need to get help," Katie shouted, yearning to push beyond the currents of chaos, her eyes wide with panic as she motioned for volunteers, but as Sarah met her gaze, fear reflected that understanding there was no time. They were all standing at the edge, desperately grasping for answers while the abyss greeted them with open arms. The weight of their past was lingering still, each current of their own stories pulling them back, and then, before the night came to a close, I felt it, a rending scream pierced through the air, a sound born from heartbreak, one that would change everything. The crowd rushed to her side, our breaths caught as the storm wrapped its fists tighter around us. Could we truly face down this chaos together when the fiercest winds carried more than mere raindrops? Would this moment prove to be a savior or a heartbreaking end? As the uncertainty loomed, it felt like hope and despair entwined, preparing to lead us deeper into the heart of the storm. The wind howled like a creature caught in despair, its wails melding with the clamor of the crowd. Each gust seemed to steal away fragments of hope, leaving behind the raw, biting air heavy with fear. I turned away from the unfolding chaos, the baby's still form and the panicked voices becoming an incoherent blur. My mind raced, tracing the lines of desperate choices each of us faced: survival, sacrifice, and the ever-looming specter of loss. Sarah continued to administer compressions, her hands steady despite the storm cracking every boundary of their fragile reality. The mother's eyes fixated on Sarah, each count echoing the pulse of a brewing storm. 5, 6, 7. The rhythmic cadence was a fragile anchor amidst the intensifying tempest swirling outside, but then there was Katie, panting heavily as she stumbled into the store, and the moment transformed, the air shifting around us. "They're trapped!" she shouted, her voice raw, slicing through the worried murmurings like a blade. "We need to help them." "Help who?" James asked, his tones suddenly sharp, nerves unraveling under the weight of urgency. "Liam, he's..." Katie choked out, her words colliding against the rising tide of the storm. "He's pinned beneath a tree." "We need to get out there." The crowd erupted in a chaos of voices, uncertainty clawing through every heart present. "Are you insane?" someone shouted. "It's too dangerous," but Katie pressed on, shoulders squared, stubborn determination illuminating her eyes like a beacon. "People are dying out there, and if we wait too long..." "Stop." The sharpness in Sarah's voice drew everyone's attention, her gaze kindling a fire I hadn't seen before. "We can't just leave. We have to save this baby." In her urgency, I felt the threads of her worry unraveling, transitioning into resolve. But the reality struck hard and fast. Inside the store, we were barraged with chaos, while outside, nature was merciless. The mother clasped her baby, trembling hands pressed against his lifeless form, the desperation palpable. "Please, help him," she choked out, her voice spiraling into anguish. The words tethered us, but another scream echoed from the outside, a sound more menacing than the storm: "Help!" A child's voice pierced through the din, desperation rising like the tide itself. Each cry struck against the heart like a hammer, and I felt my own fear twist into something else, an urgency to act before it became a haunting memory of inaction. "Sarah, we can't just stand here," I whispered, the decision forming in my mind as I felt the pulsing need within our collective conscience. "What if we split up? Some of us can try and save the baby, and the others can help outside." James' brows furrowed in deep thought, desperation creasing his features. "We can't risk it, not now." "Isn't that a risk we've already taken?" I countered, seeking a glimmer of agreement among them. "If we don't act, we're just standing by while everyone we care about suffers. Any choice we make will have consequences. At least let's give those hurt a chance." Katie stepped forward, her voice slipping through the chaos cooled by a dim spark of hope. "If we don't jump in now, we'll be haunted by those screams. We can't let fear paralyze us." And that's when I realized each of us was shackled by our past choices and fears. The enormity of this moment weighed heavier than any individual struggle. If we operated in fear, the darkness would only deepen. There was something about this storm, this night, where survival would rely on resilience and an echo of connection we all carried deep within. As nods began to ripple through the crowd, Sarah laid a hand on the mother's arm, her voice soothing but determined. "We'll do everything we can." Just saying the words seemed to reignite a flicker in that mother's eyes, a belief woven from the tapestry of despair that we need to gather supplies for the baby, James continued, and then well split up. Sarah, stay here no. Suddenly, it felt as if the storm itself ushered forth her protest, lending strength to her finality. I'm going out. The baby needs this, but those people need us too, the evolution in her determination felt startling, like a fire that had lain dormant suddenly igniting. As she turned, a drop of rain splattered against the cold glass, a mirror to the turmoil suddenly pooling around us. And suddenly, just as I thought we'd taken decisive action, a thunderous crack drew our attention back to the storm, and it felt as though the heavens themselves were bearing witness to the choices we made. Panic surged again as another streak of lightning illuminated the parking lot. It revealed a figure and I barely had time to register the reality of what was happening. A second later, a surge of water gushed violently through the doors, pushed in by the wind an instant before it fell silent once more. Out there, in the shadows of morning light slowly creeping nearer, we could see them struggling forms emerging from the depths of the storm. It wasn't just Liam, but others too, clambering toward the building, their faces stripped of hope and painted with despair. My breath caught, echoing the cries of those we feared we might not be able to save. Suddenly, for all the strides forward we had dared to make, it felt as if we had already accepted defeat, tossed in the turmoil of a world crashing down. It wasn't just about the needs of the baby now, the reality that lingered was greater, heavier, a swirling storm manifest in the flesh. In that moment, the scrape of hope we had begun to unfurl grew heavy under the burden of imminent loss, a revelation of choice looming before us all. The night wasn't done with us yet, and though I had hoped we could cut through the fog together, as the figures stumbled closer and cries of terror echoed through the chaos, an unexpected fear seized my heart. How many would we lose before dawn broke? Wind howled mercilessly outside, battering the storefront with a torrent of relentless rain, yet inside, a different kind of storm stirred. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast a shaky glow on the faces around me, illuminated with worry, determination, and a crackling tension that seemed to bind us tighter with every anguished cry from the outside. Katie's eyes darted toward the door, desperation etched deep in her furrowed brows. We can't just let them keep suffering out there, she insisted, her voice trembling but unwavering. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides as if summoning the strength to empower us all. Every second counts, I echoed, feeling the weight of that truth press upon me as the cracked glass of the window revealed silhouettes moving closer through the relentless downpour. Each unsteady step seemed to mirror the uncertainty swirling among us. Sarah, I began, turning back to her, we need to prioritize. If there's any hope to save the baby, it will require all hands on deck. We have to work together. The thought of leaving the baby was painful, yet so was the thought of letting those lost outside succumb to despair. Still, Sarah held her ground, shaking her head, her dark hair clinging to her forehead in matted wet strands. And if we divert our focus? We risk losing even the baby. Her voice trembled, doubt creeping in where once confidence thrived. The battle of wills escalated within the very fabric of that tiny store, yet amidst the turmoil, a ragged breathing turned heads. The woman who had been clutching her baby now knelt on the floor, her body shaking with soft, silent sobs. In that instant, the gravity of our choices weighed heavily upon us all. Stop it. Please, she gasped, lifting tear-streaked cheeks to meet my gaze, the rawness in her voice leaving a trail of anguish across the room. Please don't argue. We need to choose, we need to save our babies. As her raw despair washed over the crowd, the cries from outside intensified, melding into cacophony, feeding into the mounting tension encircling our every thought. I felt the certainty sliding already in shadows, fear lurking at the edge of each heartbeat. It was overwhelming. Through it all, as if the universe dared to amuse itself, a glimmer of hope flickered in a form I hadn't anticipated. Emma, a teenager who had been quiet all along, stepped forward. Her eyes mirrored a crystalline resolve, betraying the internal battle that must have danced behind them. I can go. I'll go out there, she declared suddenly, her voice trembling but resolute. I can help them reach the door. You stay here with the baby. Are you out of your mind? James uttered in shocked disbelief, his hands raised in futile protest. You can't just run out there. You'll be risking everything. I have to try. We'll never forgive ourselves if we do nothing. Emma pressed, steel weaving through her veins, undeterred by the gale outside, undeterred by fear. I'm strong enough. There was something in the sincerity behind her words that struck a chord within me. She carried a fervent light, an intensity that seemed to reach back to the heart of our collective despair, but amidst the turbulence of indecision, another crack of thunder boomed loudly in protest, dousing our fragile hope with a chilling reality. With another flash of lightning illuminating the chaos, we saw silhouettes being consumed by darkness, stories compounded in raw anguish, and the weight of our possible failures pressed down on our throats. Time is running out, I exclaimed, desperation rising within me. Let us gather supplies and divide ourselves with purpose. No one goes alone. As we scrambled to plot our course amidst the frightful thunderclaps, I caught a glimpse of Sarah, her countenance resolute. She was determined, and that emboldened us all to act. I'll help you gather what we need for the baby. If we can stabilize them for just a bit longer, she trailed off, demeanor shifting like sunlight breaking through clouds of despair. The mother nodded, and though her face was washed in sorrow, a whispered thank you fell from her lips, igniting hope among us, if only for that brief, fleeting moment. We prepared swiftly, a frenzy of motion fueled by whispers of courage, and then came another scream. This time it pierced through the veil of devastation, a chilling sound that echoed like a death knell. No! Liam! Katie nearly sobbed as she rushed to the door. I reached out to stop her, desperation gripping me tight, but she was already slipping past. Katie, no. Wait! Her silhouette vanished into the tempest as the door flung wide, swallowing her in a flurry of rain and desperation. My heart raced. Can't she see the danger? The inevitable risk? Help! She shouted, hearing her frantic voice draw sharp lines of urgency through the squall that erupted around her. But as she left, something inside me twisted an emptiness, a gnawing fear. I watched her move with the kind of fervor that came from desperation, a sacrificial bond seeming to ignite her spirit, while I remained rooted to the spot. The air grew heavier as a palpable silence enveloped us, every heartbeat seemed to echo a neglected promise of safety. Sarah's gaze swung between the fraught doorway and the people inside. We can't lose anyone else. She insisted urgently, then we need to rally together. Someone pleaded with a voice edged in panic. But a suffocating sense of dread wrapped around me, and the shadows of uncertainty loomed larger by the second. And with that, as storms raged without and hope seemed but a flickering ember, I realized we're no longer just entangled in the chaos of raging winds, we were teetering on the edge of impossible choices, our hearts caught in the throes of uncertainty, where to save one could cost us another. The relentless storm outside churned like the turmoil within, and I stood at the cusp of a shattering realization that our journey toward survival would exact a price none of us could afford to pay. And as lightning crackled once more overhead, illuminating a haunting reality, it was precisely that kind of sacrifice that could change lives forever. The door swung shut again, leaving behind a gust of icy air that seemed to suck the warmth from the room. My heart pounds in my chest like a drum, the fear of losing Katie clawing at my insides. In the aftermath of her impulsive decision, time seemed to slow, each second dripping with dread as we stood in an aching limbo. Someone must go after her. James shouted, panic rising in his voice as he scanned the group. She can't be left out there alone. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes narrowing against the flickering lights. We need to stay focused. If we lose one more person, it'll break us. We have to make sure the baby is alright. Despite her conviction, the tremor behind her words betrayed her own fear, and I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. Then we need to act fast. I replied, forcing my voice to be steady as I pushed back against the rising tide of despair. We had already lost Katie to the storm, and it was clear that it was shaking the fragile resolve amidst us. We don't know what's out there. But we can't lose ourselves to hopelessness. The mother, still cradling her baby close, broke into quiet sobs once more. The sound was a raw reminder of the stakes we faced, urging us to fight against the dark shadows that stretched long and daunting around the room. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, just help, my baby needs you more than anything." Tucking her baby closer as if to shield him from the world's cruelty, her plea stoked a fire within me. I exchanged glances with Sarah, and a silent understanding passed between us. We couldn't let despair shackle our hearts. We needed to act, to channel this grief into something greater than our fears. "Grab anything we can find, extra blankets, warm clothes," I instructed, my heart racing. "Sarah, you check the medical supplies. I'll gather anything we can use to keep the child stable." As the others scrambled into action, I could almost feel the tension in the air shift. In mere moments, it felt like we were no longer just undecided souls in a stifling store. We were warriors set against an unforgiving storm, united in this effort to fight not just for the baby, but for all of us. Emma joined our side, attempting to help Sarah with medical supplies. I couldn't help but admire her bravery. She had willingly stepped into that tempest, unafraid of its dangers, a quiet bravery sparking in her every movement. Suddenly, a loud crash resonated outside, breaking through our buzzing concentration. The thunder roared in response, drowning out a faint, familiar voice shouting for help. My heart sank deeper into my chest. The sound was unmistakable. It was Katie. "Hold on, Katie!" I yelled over the storm, frustration and helplessness surging through me as I stood at the door, my fingers wrapping around the handle. "I'm coming. Stay where you are." "Don't," Sarah pleaded, grasping my arm with fear, but I shook her off, torn between our desperate need to save Katie and the defensiveness of the chaos outside. "Help me." Katie's voice cracked, laced with pain and urgency, and my feet moved faster than my thoughts. I swung the door open, diving into the storm that encircled the store like a living beast, a tumult of wind and rain crashing against me. "Where are you?" I shouted, struggling against the fierce winds that whipped my words away. The pounding rain blurred my vision, but I could make out a shape. Katie. Just ahead, her figure wrestled against the unyielding storm, caught inside a swirling eddy. My heart raced as I fought to reach her, my lungs burning with every step forward. The icy rain pummeled me, trying to force me back, but I pressed on, desperate to grasp onto her, to pull her back from the abyss. And then, in my midst, I saw a hint of movement, a dark shadow emerging. Seeing the struggle unfold. "Liam!" Katie screamed, her voice tinged with disbelief as she stumbled towards a silhouette shadowing the chaos. But before I could take another step, before my fingertips could wrap around her arm, a surge of water swept wickedly, and the figure disappeared without a trace. "What?" I gasped, disbelief flooding through me. Was it just my imagination? Or had someone been out there who had tried to help? Torn between horror and hope, an aspect of urgency gripped my aching heart. Before I could process, a crack of thunder echoed above, and I rushed forward as Katie was yanked back against the tide of rain, her cries splitting the darkness as two figures struggled beneath the weight of relentless water. My voice became raw, fighting against panic. "I'm here. Just hold on," but grasping for what little light remained, my heart sunk when I realized I was not the only one fighting for her. Two others had emerged from the entrance, their silhouettes battling against the fray, reaching toward Katie with outstretched arms. Time limped forward, each heartbeat a pulse of dread swelling within me as all my instincts screamed for her to come back. Who were they? Had they chosen to risk everything for her? "Let go. I'll save you." A voice cried out, but just as it seemed hope teetered on the brink of emerging, another roar of wind tore through, drowning their words and prayers. With gnawing clarity, I realized this battle raged so much deeper than any of us were prepared to face. The storm had unbound its fury, and with it, unleashed a destiny we could never have anticipated. As I stood at what felt like an insurmountable distance, watching the silhouettes of those who chose to try for Katie, I felt the vast chasm and the threat of an impending despair growing inside me. None of us were safe from the merciless course we had set. And in that moment, more than the storm's fury, it was the terrifying thought that loomed: the sacrifices we sought to make could just as easily tear us apart, unraveling the very fabric of our existence. Would those efforts save one life even while protecting another? Or would it all come crashing down in a wave of loss, resounding louder than the storm itself? The sky roared once more, and with it, the pain crystallized into understanding. There was no turning back now. We were in it together, tangled in the storm of our choices, each moment precariously balanced on the edge. Would we survive the tempest ahead? Or would we become figures in its relentless grasp? I stumbled forward, the rain and wind tearing at me like the claws of some feral beast, my heart hammering against the walls of my ribcage as I saw Katie thrashing helplessly against the churn of water and despair. The figures reaching for her seemed so desperate, their outstretched arms full of hope yet shrouded in fear. Would they keep her safe or pull her under along with them? No. The scream erupted from my throat, raw and primal, drowning out the howl of the tempest. I lunged, my body pushing through the icy resistance, each step agonizingly slow, but I refused to let the deafening chaos dim my resolve. I finally broke through the relentless rain, my vision sharpening on Katie's face, contorted with fear. If ever I doubted my purpose, the anguish that twisted my gut reminded me of all that was at stake. I couldn't let the storm claim her. I reached out, my fingers brushing against her arm just as she was held prisoner by the currents. "Liam!" she cried, her voice quaking with panic. And yet, even through all the turmoil, I saw a flicker of recognition and connection in her eyes. "You're here," like a lifeline in the chaos. My presence anchored her momentarily, but the vicious tide churned on, and I felt the sharp tug of another force. The two figures pulled against the storm, every muscle straining to reach her, every heartbeat counting down to a moment of unbearable vulnerability. "Grab my hand!" I yelled, but their frantic gestures confused me. Whoever these strangers were, they too were trapped in the storm's malevolent grip. Just as their intentions became clearer, the wind surged violently, a cruel reminder of our fragility against nature's wrath. One of the figures, a woman, I realized was desperately trying to navigate the waves, but her suffering was mirrored in her eyes, tears melding with rain. She was fighting for her own. "Please. We have to trust each other," she shouted into the roaring tempest, as if she could pierce the veil of chaos surrounding us. In that moment, our eyes locked, an unspoken understanding blossoming despite the circumstances. In the heat of this battle, there was a shared instinct that we had to work together if we stood any chance of saving Katie. On three, I shouted, trying to rally our collective strength, my heart skipping as I counted. 1, 2, 3, with a fierce determination, we braced ourselves against the tide and pulled, every ounce of power we had funneled into that singular action. "Hold on, Katie." I felt the desperation bleeding into my voice as I steadied my grip around her wrist, and with a mightier heave, we tried to drag her back, inch by inch, from the mercy of the storm. The currents howled, but we didn't relent. I could see Katie's muscles straining as she fought to remain anchored to us, her fear entwining with the desperation of will, but as we tugged, another catastrophe loomed. A rogue wave twisted the scenery, crashing down upon us with a scream of fury, and I watched in horror as the figures beside me lost their grip. "No, no, no!" I shouted, the words a helpless mantra as I felt the bond between us begin to splinter. Katie's scream pierced the night, electrifying the air as she was pulled further into the depths of despair. My heart sank deeper than it had ever known as my panic clawed at my sanity. The shadows of the storm were closing in like vultures, preparing to take what little light remained. Just as I prepared to dive after her, a hand latched onto my shoulder. James, his face a grim mask of determination. "We have to get back," he yelled, his voice staunch against the howling winds, each word laced with the fervor of a commitment vowed. "We can't lose you too." But all sense of logic flickered beneath the weight of our emotional turmoil. I glanced back at the swirling darkness, at the fading silhouette of Katie, and a steel resolve settled over me, kind born of love and desperation and loss. In that heartbeat, I made a choice. "We will find her," I bellowed, even as every instinct screamed for safety. And then, right then, among the thrashing chaos of the storm, something grounded within me sparked back to life a flicker of hope. It sprang from the fierce love woven between us, resilience I hadn't realized existed until that very moment. Katie would not be lost. Just as I turned to see the path ahead, feeling the weight of fate upon my shoulders, a figure emerged through the haze, staggering forward against the wind, a familiar face clad in rain-soaked garments that clung like an omen. "Liam, I found her." The voice rang out, cutting through the din but barely recognizable. It was Emma, breathless and muddied, her eyes wild yet glowing with the remnants of hope. Behind her, there was movement, shadows flickered in the distance, and my heart raced, feelings conflicted anew, but just as clarity teetered on the brink of bliss, dread crept through me again. What had happened? Where was the line between hope and despair drawn now? Are you serious? My voice cracked, desperate to understand the reality unfolding around me. Where is she? What do you mean? And then the realization washed over me, cold and unyielding. There were others who had slipped past the shadows to chase after Katie, crossing paths entwined like vines in this storm, ushered by the simplest chords of love and faith, but one lurching thought gripped my heart as answers slipped away, a whisper woven in doubt. Would we bring her back, or had the storm claimed her to be just another victim to its relentless grasp? The pulse of anxiety surged again, heavy with torment, all my hopes drowning in an undertow of uncertainty. Just as I moved toward Emma, the expression on her face shifted. She was both a beacon and a harbinger, bewilderment hanging in the air between us, and I felt the first roots of trepidation nestle in the pit of my stomach. "Liam," she started, her voice barely dramatic above the storm, and I could sense its something darker hiding behind her fragile bravery. "We need to talk." There's something else. The weight of her words sent a shock through my body, sending ripples of fear and desperation coursing anew, and in that moment, anchored in the storm's chaos, confronted by a new uncertain truth, a chill crawled deep within me. Tempests of fate had only just begun to unfurl, and all that we had steered toward could just as easily rip asunder when confronted with shattered choices. Would we weather this together? Or had we merely charted our own tragic course, one filled with heartbreak, sacrifice, and the thin veil of hope stretched precariously before us? The storm's fury continued its relentless clamor, drowning out the world as the shadows loomed larger around us. Emma's face, streaked with mud and sorrow, seemed illuminated by the flickering gleam of those ghastly clouds overhead. I took a step towards her, but the tides of uncertainty pulled at my ankles, weighing me down. "What is it, Emma?" My voice came out strained, laced with urgency. I needed answers, but her eyes told a story of hardship and fear, and I feared what lay within was more than I could bear. "Liam, I don't know how to say this," she faltered, her breath faltering against the wind. "But when I got to the riverbank, I saw Katie. She was trying to save someone." Panic surged as I grasped for my heart. Who could she have been trying to save? "What do you mean, save someone? Was she in danger?" The thought squeezed my chest like a vice, tightening with each passing second. Emma nodded, tears mingling with rain on her cheeks. "She was pulling another girl, someone she didn't even know." Her voice cracked as she continued, "Liam, that girl slipped under and Katie went in after her." The realization settled like a lead weight. Katie was the very definition of bravery. Even in the face of tragedy, her spirit seemed unyielding. But was her bravery chasing a cruel beacon into darkness? "Did you see her? Is she? Don't know. I swear I searched, but the currents were too strong. There were too many cries, too many like her, all struggling against the tide." Emma's words collapsed under the weight of despair, and I felt a crack in my heart widen with each confession. How could this happen? It seemed unfathomable that Katie would leap into danger, risking everything for a stranger's life. "She can't just be gone. She didn't deserve this." My thoughts raced, spiraling into a chasm of anger and helplessness. "Liam, we need to find her," Emma said, her tone fierce, rekindling a spark within me, "no matter how small. We can't lose hope. We can't let the storm take her." I nodded, feeling the icy grasp of fear relent slightly, if only for a moment. But a new thought pierced through that hope like a shard of glass. Would this drive me, my choice to pursue her, only lead to greater loss? Before I had a chance to dwell, a sudden flicker caught my eye. I turned just in time to see a figure emerging from the murky depths, the rain masking their movements like shadows anchoring them in desperation. Instinctively, I lunged forward, my heart in my throat. Katie, but as the dim outline became clearer, it morphed into something indescribably wrong. It was not Katie, but the shadow of another. This figure fought against the tide, but more in surrender than in strength. I recognized the twisted features of a woman, straining to remain above water, each gasp for breath laced with pain. No, this couldn't be. Why, Lord? I murmured silently, the edges of my world beginning to blur. Why am I witnessing this? What cruel fate ties us here? Emma clutched my arm tightly, the connection grounding me against the emotional whirlwind. Liam, we have to save her. Maybe she knows something. She might have seen Katie. Heart racing, we plunged toward the woman, every sensation blurring and heightened in the chaos of our surroundings. Hold on! I shouted, reaching out to grasp her hand, but she recoiled, fear flashing in her eyes. Don't. Let me go. You'll be lost too. Her voice trembled amid the storm, struggling to rise above the tumult. No one else is going to be lost. I growled, forcing strength into my voice. Somehow, through the wind, I knew there was more entwined in her struggle than mere survival. In that moment, with desperation spiraling around us, an unexpected kindness radiated from Emma. Just as fierce and steady, she jumped to my aid, extending her hand toward the woman. Please. You can't give up. If you're holding on to something, let us help you. Through the quagmire of despair, the woman hesitated, gazing into Emma's eyes, and I saw a flicker of something understanding. Perhaps the fragile thread of hope existed still, even for her. I released my faith once more, pushing my own limits. And wrapped my arms around both Emma and our new companion, absorbing the storm in solidarity. And then, amidst the clamor of rain and pain, it happened. She grasped my hand, and together we began pulling. The currents roared, but our combined strength fought back, and it was then that my insides twisted with a semblance of hope. As we hoisted her up toward the shore, the woman's face emerged from the water's vice, soaked and twisted with exhaustion, but alive. No, I can't. I saw, she gasped, and even in her weakened state, it was clear her heart was full of burdens left unshared, broken secrets begging to surface. Are you okay? I asked, pulling her closer to shore, urging every ounce of strength from within. You need to tell us what you saw. But as those words left my lips, the storm surged, sending a wave cascading over us, drowning out our shared struggle. In the chaos, I felt the grip on my hand slip away. Instinctively, I looked down only to witness the woman's skin transforming, suddenly matching the darkness of the water, her features fading, pulling back like a phantom. No! No! I cried, desperately reaching for her before she vanished back into the depths, her final whispers dissolving into the roar of the tempest. And then came a shudder in the air, a revelation that gripped me like no other. A shock traveled through me as I turned back toward Emma, realizing the treacherous path before us held more layers of sorrow and truth than I had ever considered. The storm bore not just fury, but the devouring secrets of fate and love intertwined. I could feel my heartbeat speeding, sensing that every choice I made from here on would tether us to an inescapable darkness lingering just beyond the horizon. And as I met Emma's gaze, the truth in her eyes, the fear and fierce hope all tangled into one, lashed against my heart like the very waves that had threatened to drown us. Liam, she whispered, her voice breaking with the weight of the storm. What have we just unleashed? As the winds howled louder than ever before, I feared that chasing after hope had only opened a trapdoor to deeper despair. Little did I know, the hardest choices were yet to be made, but the storm had only begun to reveal its true nature, and my heart raced at the thought of what would come next. The storm raged outside like a beast unleashed, yet inside the grocery store, an unexpected calm settled over the tumultuous chaos. We were alive, still standing amidst the remnants of desperation, each heartbeat a reminder of how perilous our situation had become. The cacophony of the hurricane roared like a living pulse, yet there was something magnificent in the tenderness that began to ripple among us. As I stood there, surrounded by panicked faces and anxious hearts, time seemed to suspend itself. There was no denying the heaviness that weighed us down, but with each breath shared, a mutual understanding emerged. No longer were we simply strangers trapped by nature's wrath. we had evolved into a makeshift family forged in the crucible of shared pain. United by the colossal weight of sacrifice, unraveling secrets, and the promise of hope, our individual stories began to weave together. Katie's bravery echoed around me like an unquenchable flame, and I could picture her, fierce and unyielding, diving into treacherous waters to save someone she may never know. I could see Emma's bravery, standing alongside me firmly, not just for herself but for others as well. I felt an urgency coursing through my veins, knowing that our lives were intertwined in ways we were still only beginning to comprehend. We had faced darkness together, and perhaps now, there was light slowly pouring in. Liam. A voice cried, and I turned to see Sarah rushing toward me, her eyes ablaze with a dawning realization. We have to save that baby, the mother needs us. She's been so strong, and if we don't act now. Her words trailed off, and time seemed to hold its breath around us. I know, I replied, my voice steady against the rising tide of fear. In that moment, clarity forged its way forward, cutting through the chaos and binding us to purpose. We had come this far, and we could not falter now. Together, we would weave our collective strength into an unbreakable thread of resolve. Emma, are you with us? I turned to her, hoping to find the unwavering spirit I had witnessed seconds before. Her eyes sparkled with unshed tears, a mixture of fear and conviction swelling in her heart. Always, she murmured, and in that one simple word, a flicker of new beginnings ignited, glowing brightly amidst the shadows of uncertainty. A chorus of agreement rippled through the others gathered around us, a chorus of acknowledgement that we wouldn't falter. I grasped Sarah's hand, feeling a spark flicker between us, and Emma stepped forward, the collective weight of all our fears morphing into something profound at that exact moment. Then came the sudden burst of sound that drew our attention back outside. A gnarled flash illuminating the stormy sky, revealing figures emerging from the darkness. Those poor souls running from the depths of despair, their worn bodies fighting against the onslaught of nature. Get ready. Jameis' booming voice reached my ears, emboldening the rest of us as we approached the doors. Our hearts were synchronized in this path to salvation, steeled with urgency. But how could we confront the chaos when life and death were teetering on a knife's edge? The door burst open with a ferocious creak, rain surging in like an invading army, and as I gathered my senses, I saw her, the broken mother, clutching her baby tight against her chest as if he were the very essence of her heart, as if the raw despair of his fragile condition could extinguish her flame. I rushed forward, heart pounding as the torrent of rain wrestled against me. We're here to help, I shouted, my words rising above the storm's wails. The other figures began to inch closer, but the currents of wind clawed against my resolve. Something unfurled in that moment, the parting of the storm clouds or the dawn of compassionate echo, something that felt overwhelmingly like hope transformed into action. Just as I reached for the trembling mother, a sudden jolt beneath my feet threw me to the ground. The earth trembled as the buildings shuddered around us, echoing the years of trepidation that had amassed among us all. Get back! Someone shouted amidst the pandemonium, but I couldn't push away from the mother's clasped hands, burning within my heart like lithium, the weight of our shared anguish shared across a vast divide. Please! Help him, she gasped, desperation ripping through her voice like a dagger. I thought I'd lost him, she whispered, cradling the baby tightly and swaying as the ground settled again beneath us, her breath hitched in fear. Yet within that moment, something shifted. The love behind those words wasn't just for that child, it was for all of us, tethering us in a space where hope precariously balanced on the precipice of chaos. I reached out and cradled the baby gently, feeling the tiny rhythm of a fragile heartbeat. Instinctively, Sarah stepped in, her hands beginning to work their magic. In that instant, I finally understood. Everyone here had lost something to the storm. Each of us had faced a loss that left an indelible mark on our hearts. Fear, guilt, and the burden of survival coiled around us like shadows. And yet, amid the palpable fear tearing at us, a collective resilience began to weave its way through the cracks in our spirits. As we worked quickly, I caught Emma's gaze, and something lit between us. This battle against despair was worth it, not just for the baby, but for Katie, for each person we had lost and fought for the darkness that had sought to eclipse light. Together, on that fateful night, we fought against the pull of grief, pushing back against what sought to drown us. And when Sarah insisted the mother needed to breathe, needed to know her child was safe, I felt the truth echo. This storm was not just a tempest of nature, but a revelation of the frailty of our existence. With every breath we found together, with every whispered word of encouragement, something began to shift. I held the baby close, watching as Sarah worked her magic, her gentle hands moving with hope and conviction. The power of love surged to the forefront, binding us together amidst unrelenting odds. And then, in the most profound moment, I felt the baby respond. A flicker of warmth, strong yet fragile as he stirred slightly, that breath of life surging forth unexpectedly, catching me off guard. "It's working!" Sarah gasped, her voice threading through the echoes around us. "Just keep going, we can do this." It was then that I finally comprehended the weight of sacrifice. Our stories may have been deeply intertwined with loss, but a new chapter was varying between our hearts, hope, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of survival. The baby's fragile heartbeat beat in sync with the love, the bond we shared. And in that moment, I heard the distant sound of sirens approaching, their echo mixing with the wind, hope at last creeping its way closer through the storm. Moments later, there was light filtering through the chaos, a sliver splitting the clouds, nature's fierce veil pulling back to reveal the dawn, the first brushstrokes of light promising renewal. Soon, we would step outside the shadows of despair, but haste, the most astonishing twist of fate, as two horizons met, we finally offered each other the most profound gift, love forged in the fiercest fires of compassion. And as day broke with sharp brilliance, casting rays of warmth across our faces, I sensed Danny looking up at me, innocent eyes shining with courage learned through the chaos. "Mommy, we are all okay?" he asked, the clarity of his spirit resonating like a song of hope. I smiled. Our healing had begun. "Yes, sweetheart. We are all okay." In that moment, I realized that no matter how fierce the storms grew outside, inside, the love we carried would always be enough to shield us. And as those sirens drew nearer, I could only hope we'd forge the bonds that could answer life's relentless storms and embrace the ever-present horizon of each new day. That we were stronger now, forged anew. Together, we stood at the dawn of a new beginning, hearts entwined in a tapestry of promise. Little did I know that this moment would be the crux of all our journeys, intertwined, love never truly lost but rather emerging anew. From the ashes of storms weathered, ready to illuminate even the darkest depths of despair. And at that moment, I whispered the greatest truth that had been sown amongst us all: in the heart of every storm, there exists a light strong enough to guide us home.